I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Academy Award nominee Kelly Port, Visual Effects Supervisor on Spider-Man No Way Home, nominated this year alongside his colleagues Dan Sudik, Scott Edelstein, and Chris Wagner. First of all, Kelly, congratulations on your second career Oscar nomination.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting.
Oh, I can imagine it would be. No Way Home is not only one of the most successful films of all time, it was also, the top rated film on Rotten Tomatoes, which is really saying something. So it kind of feels like the nomination was in the bag, but seriously, so many times the Academy have proven us wrong, and you never quite know whether or not that nomination is actually going to happen. So, and particularly because this year there were so many awesome films vying for in contention in this category. So you should be immensely proud that you guys made it through.
We are very proud, and you're right. It's a tough year, and it keeps getting tougher. It seems like every year. You look at the 10 films that had to be narrowed down to five, and all were just excellent in quality. And when I think about as an Academy voter myself, I think about you try to think about it logically. Like what is about a particular visual effects film that is deserving of a nomination, or if you were to sort of score it on different criteria. To me, it's about various things, and you can kind of weight these differently. But sometimes it's certainly about quality. Um, does it look good? Does it fit in? Like does it is it consistent across the whole film, or is it sort of jump like, oh, that doesn't like that? If it takes you out of the movie, that's the worst thing that could happen for a visual effect.
Yeah.
I personally like invisible effects where there's a lot of work that has been done behind the scenes, but you don't necessarily, no one really has any idea that there are any visual effects happening. And there are a ton of those in Spider-Man No Way Home, um, that just people just don't even realize that are there. Um, it's about innovation. Is there something that is technically new, or was there a problem that has been solved in a unique way that we should take special notice of? These are all these sort of criteria that are important, but you can have all of these in a relatively small film and a relatively big film. And so at some point, if you're able to manage all of those things, but at volume, at a much bigger scale, to me, that should count as something, some portion of that criteria as well. Because obviously, the more there is, the more complex it gets, and it's harder to pull it off when you're dealing with 2,000, 600 shots or whatever, versus a fewer shots, but you're able to maintain that consistency and innovation and efficiency, but also very creative and innovative at
Yeah.
the same time.
I always wonder that because obviously you want effects to support the story, you want it to be seamless, you want it to blow your mind, but also I figure every year, how could they possibly innovate any further? Like, haven't we gotten to that point, that peak where there's nowhere else to go? What are your thoughts on that? Because every year I'm always surprised about how far this craft is going and is still probably still going.
Oh, absolutely. There's room for innovation, 100%. Um, Innovations like artificial intelligence, machine learning, a lot of those are in their infancy. We introduced some of that in Infinity War with Thanos and Josh Brolin. Machine learning to get the kind of facial detail and in the facial capture that had previously not been seen before, by utilizing some of those techniques. Um, and that only continues to get more and more uh, evolved. Artificial intelligence, like we don't quite, there isn't quite that path hasn't been um, integrated into visual effects. And I think what we're going to be seeing, probably in an almost an exponential way over the next decade or two, is things like the introduction of that to help various things, help realism, to help digital doubles, so you're not just tracking faces on, but like actually using like a la deep fake sort of ideas, things like
Yeah.
that. Automatic rotomation, or at least helping the artists who are doing rotomation, which is a painstaking, laborious, frame by frame rotomating or 3D rotomation, where we had to, you know, basically track the folding of cloth on somebody and their exact fingers and hands and positions. And so I think there's going to be artistry and labor intense skill sets that are going to be needed for a long time in the future. But I think there's going to be the innovations are going to be, my guess is going to be along those lines, where you're going to get some of this help from artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, is going to help that process. It's going to probably cut the cost down. It's going to take
Yeah.
some of the time away. Because what makes things look so great these days is our ability to iterate. So to see something not just once or twice because you only have the computing power to render it once or twice, but now you can actually, if a lighting artist is with the power of processors and AI perhaps down the road, is able to see their lighting like in real time. I mean, we're getting very close to this idea with gaming engines right now. So those things will start to come intertwine and start to integrate with each other. But you're just able to like do this. It's like, well, I can't really see it. Like I'm gonna light this. I'm gonna set it on the render farm for 2 hours. I'll check it
Yeah.
out. Oh, I have to make an adjustment. Do it again. Now I'm just gonna do this like in real time. Maybe bring in the DP. Get like
Wow.
there's so much that is exciting in the future to come for visual effects.
That is so exciting. Like if you think back to like the original Star Wars and then like T2 Judgment Day, because I thought of T2 because of I'm thinking of Skynet when you're talking about machine learning. Then The Matrix in '99. Fast forward all the way to the MCU and the amazing effects we see in that, particularly Infinity War, which is in my family the number one MCU film of all time. And then Spider-Man, right? Like there's so many sequences that we can talk about. Honestly, like just even something as straightforward as just watching MJ and Peter kind of swing through the city
Mm.
blew my mind. I'm wondering what are you most proud of in terms of a particular sequence in the film?
Oh,
There's
that's a
so many.
you can't ask me that question because well, I really do have a fondness for all of them, to be honest, and kind of for different reasons. I think the initial big sequence on the bridge where Doc Ock is introduced is a really good example of the kind of visual effects that you could have gone on the Brooklyn Queens Expressway and shut it down and shot in New York and do all these kind of crazy things. Obviously, that becomes prohibitive at a certain point, but theoretically that's possible. And we wanted it to look like that. John Watts and his really one of the very first things he said to me is like, I really want this to feel, as grounded as humanly possible. Yes, all these extraordinary things are happening for sure, but we want to be we want to visualize this as if we were there to see it with our camera crew, with our cranes, with these particular cameras and the technology, the live action technology that is at our disposal, drones, uh, Steadicam, like you name it. But if you're just because you in a virtual camera in a CG world, you have really a lot of that comes down to camera work, and it's like if you're able to just do anything, a lot of times that takes you out of a movie. If the camera's just moving too fast or unrealistic acceleration or deceleration, things like that. Now you can obviously do that stylistically, but we really made an effort to keep this as if this could be photographed by physical live action equipment, and we kind of held true to that as much as possible throughout all the sequences. Um,
Yeah.
but like I think probably one of the most creatively fun sequences for me and the guys that did the pre-visualization and Framestore, who ultimately did the sequence, was the Spider-Man and Doctor Strange chase,
Yeah.
where you took elements from Doctor Strange, the mirror dimension, the rotating Manhattan buildings, and the warping of all that. But then, what can we do to keep this fresh and exciting and new at the same time, but still to stay true stylistically to some of that mirror dimension that's been established? Because the whole point of that is they're chasing. Strange is chasing Spider-Man. He's trying to get this box, but Spider-Man keeps adapting to the environment because he's so good at adapting to the environment. So Strange is throwing everything in his path to kind of slow him down and obstruct his route. But so we just had fun playing with different ideas, like hybridizing the Manhattan and Grand Canyon and flipping stuff upside down. And you're just like, this is just so fun, just
Yeah.
okay, what if this, and what if it turns upside down, and then we're playing with portals, and like, what would happen if you had two portals, or it's like mirrors, and then they falling into an infinite number of portals, and what do you see when you're looking at a portal from the other side? Is it, so you get into these really mind-tripping kind of conversations creatively with the team, with John and the team, and it's just so fun that was a very fun sequence to explore.
Yeah.
And then I'd probably say, like, the end battle was just fun because then we're playing with Toby and Andrew, and how you kind of connect those guys, and just and keeping true stylistically to their films and their kind of key poses and looks, like when they're landing or when they're in the air, their gait when they're running, all sorts of things like that. We, paid very close attention to and researched. So just putting that all together in a really fun edit was really rewarding.
Totally right. What I noticed was the effects in this film don't feel cartoony to me, because that's one of my layman's complaints. Like, oh, that feels a bit cartoony. There's a lot of texture, reflection. The transitions, sorry, are very seamless to me, and I just felt like so immersed. And then I was thinking, your team, John Watts, the director, had to bring back a lot of shots and looks from previous iterations of Spider-Man that were done years ago, when, as we mentioned earlier, they didn't have the same technology that we have now. So I just wonder, was that particularly challenging to bring back, for example, Doc Ock? We know what he looks like from back then, but you made him look the same. You even de-aged Alfred Molina, but it just, for some reason, it just looks better. It feels more immersive, and I just thought that would have been really difficult to accomplish.
Well, yes, it was difficult, but yes, the SSVFX is a company that did the de-aging for Molina, and a company called Mars was the company that did the de-aging for Willem Dafoe. They both did a great job, and it's subtle enough that like we talked about earlier, like, this is the kind of thing that you don't want to call attention to itself. You just want it to kind of play, and if people just don't notice it, that's great. That's what we want. And we didn't necessarily have to do the de-aging with the two other Spideys, because they came from a later timeline, and they were the age that they are or would be. But yeah, also just in terms of like asset management and things like that, what's really interesting is that even if a company like, let's say, ImageWorks, who worked on those previous two films, had those assets, meaning the models or the textures, maybe even the rigs to animate them, they more than likely just wouldn't work today. Things have evolved, and it's like what we're talking about earlier, is whether it's just the process of visual effects production, software, like, imagine it's like, oh yeah, an app on your iPhone. It's like, well, I used that app in, 10 years ago. So let me just try to open it.
Yeah,
It just doesn't work.
doesn't
It
work.
just period just doesn't work. And and so you can maybe find a model. Maybe you can use it as a reference to resculpt something that will work for today. But effectively, we had to start from scratch in all of these characters. We did have access to I think the ImageWorks office in Vancouver had the Ock arms, like in a display case, or at least one of them. So they were very kind and let us sort of take that out and took reference photos, like very detailed reference photos for us. Um, and um, and of course, in this film, they were all digital versus in the previous film, they were a combination of puppeteered and digital.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Before we move on to my final question, I must say with the Mirrorverse, I think Doctor Strange, the original film, that was nominated for visual effects. A lot of that had to do with the Mirrorverse effects that was so groundbreaking at the time. And I just never thought you'd be able to top that. But the Mirrorverse stuff in this film is completely breathtaking. So kudos to the team who created all that stuff. But it brings me to this. What you're doing sounds like my dream job. And I reckon a lot of kids, there's millions of them, watching MCU films like No Way Home and dreaming of one day doing what you're doing. Firstly, do you pinch yourself that you're at the absolute forefront of your craft? And secondly, how did you get into this to begin with?
What a great question, and it's very wonderful to be able to answer that. I, when I first got into it, which is close to 30 years now, I started at Digital Domain, and I was a software PA. I started from I learned everything on the job, um, starting with I literally was typing for a software engineer who had carpal tunnel syndrome.
Wow.
And so I was like typing C++ code, not knowing C++ code. And, he would just basically talk in my ear and I would type it. He would say left curly bracket space 4 I equals 1, And then I took UCLA extension classes just to understand a little bit of C++ code so that he could just talk to me in like English. And I said, okay, make a for loop or make a structure or whatever. I'm not a programmer by any means, but that just helped. Gradually worked, lucky to be at that company at the right time, starting kind of the year after it was founded by James Cameron, Stan Winston, and Scott Ross.
Amazing.
And we worked on these amazing films, like all around the same time with these early films. Like my very first film was Strange Days, Catherine Bigelow,
Wow. Yeah.
which is a really cool film. But that was just my very first foray into visual effects as an artist. And then Apollo 13, Titanic, Fifth Element, all of those films, kind of within a span of not too many years, I was able to get my hands on those, and then just kind of gradually, learned and evolved with with the different projects, different problems to solve, bigger teams to manage. And there's sort of a career path for that. Nowadays, you can also there's degrees in it. There's the resources for online learning and self-motivated people who are interested in learning these things. All of the major software that we use, Maya, Houdini, Nuke, are all available for free for students. So anyone that has a relatively good computer and the sort of a mind to self teach and learn can do that. YouTube is an amazing resource. I remember, I think it was like 95, somebody came to me. I was searching on something like Ask Jeeves or something like that, some search engine. And he's like, oh, you should try this new one called Google. I'm like, okay. The internet has evolved quite a bit since then.
Sounds like
Um, but yeah, it's, my first excitement about uh, and I didn't know what it was at the time, was when I was 10 and saw Star Wars, the first Star Wars in '77, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. Like that's so cool. Like, you know, I wanted to do very different things. I would say to people that are interested in it, find your passion, um, do your passion, like as much as you possibly can. Look for solutions. You got to be a problem solver, and like you got to enjoy problem solving. You got to be curious, uh, and you want to always be the kind of person who's always wanting to learn every day. I remember I just love this idea that um, there's not a day that goes by where I feel like I can't learn something new. Like, and it doesn't have to be from a, a peer level colleague or something like that. I certainly learn from them, or I reach out to them. I research, but I can also learn from an intern who's like a crazy gamer that just told me about this thing the other day that just happened. Oh, did you see that new thing? Like, oh, that's really cool. Maybe we could use that for, there's something every day. It's evolving very fast. So you have to have this, um, not just have it as if it's a bad thing, like embrace curiosity, embrace learning, embrace the idea that you're not going to know everything all, ever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would be the good advice that I could offer, given
like it.
my path.
I like it. It's a passion for learning, do what you love, and and make the right choices. And you could be the next Kelly Port in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. Who knows? Man, I really appreciate your time today. I love the movie. I love your work. We so much joy for so many people watching this film and previous work that you've been on. And thanks again. Good luck at the Oscars.
Thank you so much.